Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul Hill, and by popular demand, I am delighted again to be able to speak to Dr. Adam Hill, CEO of Oncimmune, a next-generation immunodiagnostics firm. So welcome, Adam.
Good to see you again, Paul.
And now a lot's been happening over the last few months since we last spoke in November, not least today's excellent contract news with Roche and Cedars-Sinai. But before we sort of unpick the details, can you just quickly walk us through sort of top level, the immense sort of versatility and power of Oncimmunes antibody sort of profiling technology, how it's used to make sort of innovative services and products across three enormous therapeutic areas: autoimmune, infectious diseases, and oncology.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And to remind your listeners, Oncimmune is the leader in auto-antibody-based immunodiagnostics. That is the biomarker that comes off one axis of the immune response. We have two axes to our immune response, the T cell and the B cell, and we're absolutely the world expert in the B cell axis and the biomarkers that are used to profile that axis of the immune response. And we've developed a common platform across both our product and our service businesses that is very well patented, over 220 patents, over 160 peer-reviewed papers, and sets us absolutely at the forefront of this field, not just in detecting cancer early, but also picking the right patients for the right treatment in cancer, in autoimmune disease, and more latterly in infectious diseases. So one common platform that supports our product business, a business that sells a box with 10 diagnostic devices in it, that can be run in someone else's laboratory, and ships those via our 19 relationships to 24 countries around the world. And our service business that receives blood samples from patients on clinical trials sponsored by a pharmaceutical company. It analyzes using our Serotag and Navigate technologies from that common platform, those blood samples, and it presents data back to the pharmaceutical company sponsor. Now, importantly, we go beyond the data at that point and provide them with something actionable, something that they can actually do something with. It's not just a report from a management consultancy. This is some intellectual property that we're handing over to them and saying, look, we think this can add tremendous value in picking the right patients for trials, in replicating the same experiment across multiple clinical trials, or importantly, developing a companion diagnostic or a complementary diagnostic to improve the in-market economics for your drug once you get to the point of launch. And the one further thing I will say is that intellectual property we own, is based off our background, and is not in anyone's numbers. But of course, we're going to be monetizing that in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and in the world of sort of personalized medicine, when we move from sort of a one-fits-all approach to a unique sort of person-to-person approach, why is this technology so important? And equally, why is it so important to select the right patients to do the right clinical trials?
Well, look, I mean, the world is moving towards a more personalized approach to therapies, because it's been well recognized for now 30 or 40 years that drugs that work in the majority don't always work in everyone. Yeah. And so picking the right patient for the right drug not only improves the chance of treating the disease the drug is intended to treat, but also can change dramatically the economics for a healthcare system. If your drug, like is the case with checkpoint inhibitors, only works in 25% of the population, then give it to the 25% it's going to work in. Don't give it to the other 75%, particularly when we know that in checkpoint inhibitors, 80% of patients receiving the drug go on to get some form of side effect, what we would call an immune-related adverse event. And that can cost the system even more. In fact, it could end up putting you in hospital. So the idea that you pick the patients that are going to respond positively to the drug with the minimum number of side effects is absolutely the market that we're focused at with this with this technology. And why is it different? Because of course, we're not the only ones that recognize this opportunity. And well, it's different because every other approach to diagnostics, particularly in cancer, has focused on understanding the mechanism by which the cells have gone wrong and therefore cause cancer, rather than understanding the body's response to those cells that have gone wrong. It's that latter approach that we've taken. It provides us a different lens on the problem. It presents different data, but importantly, it's complementary to everyone else's approach because they've taken a different route to find a common answer.
Yeah, and I would point investors. There was about 5 or 6 years ago, there was 2 immunotherapy drugs in the States which were running side by side. One was developed by Merck, Keytruda, and the other one was Bristol Myers, which was basically, or Opdivo, developed by Bristol Myers. And they were both equally optimistic in terms of their chances to treat lung cancer before they'd actually got into clinical trials. And as I understand it, the design of the clinical trial for Keytruda was much better and precise than the one for Opdivo. And the Keytruda's ended up to be the world's biggest lung cancer immunotherapy or checkpoint inhibitor. So I would just point investors to that. That's the sort of significance. You can lose the lead of the biggest cancer drug in the world if you get your design of your therapeutic. Anyway, moving swiftly on to the contract news. Can you just take quickly through sort of like what the significance is of the Roche and the Cedars-Sinai contracts, the scale, and the sort of the upselling and sort of like further opportunities in terms of those particular deals?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. So we signed a deal with the British government September last year to develop for them a infectious disease panel. I read COVID here, and we'd been in conversation since March of the year about how we could help the pandemic response, and it became clear that how we would offer a differentiated support to the COVID response would be to develop a panel that could not only determine or predict the severity of the disease, but also predict your response to vaccines and therapies. That panel has been developed hand in hand with the Medicines Discovery Catapult, another part of the government's life science infrastructure in the United Kingdom. And today we have a validated beta panel. This is a test panel that is ready for prime time from a commercial perspective, but from which we will learn and feed those learnings into the full fat version of this panel, which will be completed and out onto the market as a service by the back end of the summer. We were delighted that Cedars and a biotech called Augmenta wanted to help us with the development of that panel. And indeed, we've run their samples and presented very successful data back to them. But importantly, on the back of that, Cedars now have wanted to run a further sample set, a substantial and very unique sample set on both the beta panel and, when it's available, the full fat panel. And they believe that there's going to be some really quite interesting scientific discovery from that work with the novel panel. Hand in hand with that, of course, and just demonstrating again the commercial potential of this infectious disease panel, which again is in no one's numbers, because until we've commercially validated this, we haven't wanted to provide any guidance to analysts on the potential forecast from this panel. But the infectious disease panel also now is going to be used by Roche Pharma to analyze samples from its Covacta study. Roche is in the middle of assessing the potential to manage moderate and severe COVID patients with its biologic therapies developed for another purpose, and so we would call these repurposed drugs. And they've run a series of experiments, Covacta, Mariposa, and Remdacta, and it's the Covacta study that we're going to be analysing samples on. So I think all in all, this is just great validation, commercial validation of the R&D work that we've been doing with government funding since the back end of last year.
Oh, I mean, yeah, definitely with those two names. I mean, they're huge endorsements of the technology. Just on that one with the Covacta with Roche, I understand they're repurposing its immunosuppressant. Is this potentially something to do with the COVID storm, that when people sort of have a very severe immune response when they're in hospital, effectively their lungs get full up with COVID, and there's no way, even ventilation doesn't help them. Is this something that if we use immunosuppressant or something like that we can help those patients who, frankly, have a very dire outlook?
That's exactly it. The hope is that this could moderate or reduce the severity of COVID pneumonitis, the infection of and the inflammation of the lung field, which of course ends up with people needing intubation and ventilation on an intensive care unit. So we are going to be supporting that study by providing them insight as to how people's immune response, and in particular the B cell axis of their immune response, is altered when treated with these drugs.
Can you also, just moving now to the oversubscribed placing, the fundraise you did, the £9 million last week, which was actually done at a premium to the shares, so it was obviously done, very well received. Can you just walk us through what you're planning to spend the money on?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. The placing was incredibly well received. I think the book was about 3 times oversubscribed, and as a result, we were able to also do a secondary on behalf of one of our substantial shareholders into that oversubscription, the overdemand for the book. We issued £9 million worth of shares at a premium. It was about a 5% premium on the previous day's close, which and you'll know better than I, but I think it was MaxCyte, was it, the last AIM company that did a raise at a premium, and that must have been 6 or 9 months ago now.
It's very rare. You only get it for top quality companies.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pretty rare event, and we're very pleased with the support that we got from some excellent institutional holders. And we're going to be doing one very simple thing with that money. As we've spoken about previously, this company has been for about 18 months now fully funded to meet market expectation. But the last 2 times I've been out to speak to the market, presenting end of year and interim results, I've been challenged by holders and non-holders alike about really punching through market expectation. What's stopping you doing more than the analysts have currently got you pegged for the next 3 years, Adam? And I think, on reflection, there was only one thing, and that was simply capacity in our Dortmund facility, where we run our ImmunoInsights, our service business from. We had a capacity of about 10,000. We still have that capacity today. Our utilization rate of that capacity is about 60%, because these are biological specimens. It's not a car parts business. So once you take them out the freezer, you have to analyze them. You can't put them back in and take them out. So you can't achieve much more than 60, maybe 65% utilization of your capacity anyway. But there was the belief, by putting in a second line, mirroring the capex, mirroring the equipment, mirroring the skills of the first line that we've had up and running in Dortmund for about 18 months now, we would be able to quadruple capacity. So the intent is to put that second line in. I'm delighted we've been able to already order the capex. We're starting to burn through lead times. Job adverts have gone up. In 2 days, there's over 100 applicants for jobs in our Dortmund facility, which is incredible, an incredible response. And so we believe that by the middle of the summer, we're going to have a second functional line up and running. By the back end of this year, calendar year, conservatively, we're going to be able to increase capacity to about 20,000 samples a year. And by the beginning of next summer, so 13 months time from now, we'll be at about 40,000 samples a year. Now this really just unlocks the demand that we're seeing within our pipeline. We've got about 130 qualified opportunities with 80 discrete pharmaceutical companies and biotech sat in our pipeline today, and we estimate that therefore we're going to be able to absorb the capacity we've created with our pipeline as it stands alone. But you have to remember, and as we spoke about earlier, that's without superimposing the infectious disease panel upon that pipeline, which will open up us to a number of other pharmaceutical companies that hitherto we simply haven't had an opportunity to talk to. So I think that pipeline will continue to strengthen.
Where geographically, Adam? I understand that some of the part of the money is going to spend in the States, which is the world's biggest and most advanced medical market by a mile.
That's right. And whilst we're going to be putting the second line in Dortmund, Germany, and that makes a lot of sense, we do need to have BD folk sat proximate to the major customers that we see within our existing pipeline. And so we're looking to hire 3 heads into the US. We, of course, used to run a subsidiary of about 30 people out of Kansas, but it'll be 3 BD heads targeting pharmaceutical companies in the US, and we're also going to be putting 2 additional BD heads into Europe, in and around Germany and Switzerland, where the majority again of pharma companies have their R&D facilities or headquarters.
And the quality of the pipeline, I'm guessing it's sort of like most of your big, you could perm any of the big names out the States, the likes of, I'm just guessing here, but sort of Gilead, Pfizer, Merck, Amgen, Bristol Myers. I mean, they're just absolutely enormous businesses. And I think also for investors, what people should understand is that we've actually, because of the COVID pandemic, entered a golden period for medicine going forward, because I think what we've done, we've proved that medical science can run at a pace unknown previously, which means that if we're going to move to personalized medicine, the immunotechnology profiling discovery mechanism you have, and likewise with all the treatment and stuff like that, the services and the diagnostics and the products, they're becoming far more important in that background of supercharged innovation.
That's right. Look, I mean, people are running really fast, and COVID has been a period of introspection where these pharma scientists have wanted more and more data, and we've of course benefited from that. And as we come out of the pandemic, I think our world will have changed, as will theirs. And this new pace of innovation that people have now witnessed through the development of not only diagnostics but also vaccines is not going to abate anytime soon. There's going to be plenty of work moving forward.
Yeah, and these are enormous markets, aren't they? I mean, I think Oncimmune is worth about $80 billion. I mean, I think we're going to spend $100 billion just on COVID vaccines this year, and immunotherapies must be a similar sort of number as well.
That's right. I mean, just the checkpoint inhibitor market is worth 80 billion a year. And look, that was from a standing start 10 years ago, with 0 revenue. So these markets are really accelerating at some incredible pace, and need to be serviced by new technologies. There are really healthy pipelines in pharma companies across cancer, autoimmune disease, and now particularly as a result of COVID in infectious diseases. So we're in a great place at a great time.
Yeah. And now just moving quickly to the products division, I saw your US partner Biodesic, and this is all public information, so investors can sort of like look on their website and draw down the same presentations as I do. But they've had a really very novel way of combining your leading early CDT lung cancer test with one of theirs that gives them an unbelievably high accuracy of, I think it was a specificity from your side of about 98% and a sensitivity of 97%, or that's what they're publishing anyway. To do sort of like to be able to test for early stage malignant lung cancer nodules within patients. So can you just walk us through that? Because it seems very coincidental they're now beefing up their sales because they believe in the success of this dual combination combo product.
Yeah, more than happy to. It was a conversation. All of this started with a conversation at JP Morgan a few years ago between myself and the previous chief executive. That really had us both sit down and say, look, the clinical community is split. There are a portion of the clinical community that believe you need to rule in to a diagnosis. That means on the back of a positive test, you act, but a negative test doesn't tell you very much at all. There is a portion of the same clinical community that believes you need to rule out in these patients. That means on the back of a negative test, you act. On the back of a positive test, it doesn't mean very much at all. And at the moment, at that point in time, they had a rule out test and we had a rule in test. And so we were pulling this community apart when in reality, the need was for there to be a rule in test and a rule out test for use in patients. And so after a very adult conversation, we agreed that actually these two tests needed to be marketed together. We sold our US subsidiary to Biodesics at the end of October 2019. They launched, of course, the dual test strategy in March 2020, straight into the mouth of the pandemic, which was unfortunate. But nonetheless, had seen a tremendous demand ahead of launch for the dual strategy, and are now seeing as their vaccination program gets up and going, pulmonologists demanding the dual strategy, which is highly differentiated. I mean, no one else has both rule in and rule out tests in their kit bag, able to sell to a pulmonologist managing very, very complex nodule patients. Now it gets even better because of course you have to choose which one of these goes first, a rule-in test or a rule-out test. And actually, in the run-up to their IPO, October last year, BDSX, for your listeners, is the ticker on NASDAQ of Biodesics. They decided that our test would be used first, which means that it stands as the foundation stone to everything else that then goes after it, which drives the highest volume of patients through our test. And as you quite rightly said, and as we had anticipated in the forecasting, of course, when we built this model for the contract, they are increasing their sales team. They're in the mid-30s at the moment, and they have expressed a desire and a plan over the next 12 months to get to close to 80 salespeople. And with each salesperson doing 1,000 or 1,500 of these tests a year, you can do the numbers for yourself. It becomes a substantial opportunity for them.
Well, I mean, again, I point investors to look at their slide, Pat, because they reckon there's 5 million tests which should be in theory done on a steady state basis. And given we've now also got a lot of pent up demand caused by COVID, I mean, the same situation is in the UK. It could be, an absolute a game changer because it'll save if it's confirmed in trials and stuff. It will save the US healthcare system literally billions a year, won't it, in healthcare costs and patient outcomes.
Absolutely. And look, for your listeners, both of these tests have been very well validated as standalones. And the combination, actually, they published some results at a conference at the back end of last year. And so peer-reviewed presentation of that combined strategy, I'm sure, will be forthcoming in the not too distant future. But as I've said, there is already tremendous demand from pulmonologists managing nodule patients in the US for this strategy.
And a favour for investors here, Adam, can you give the CEO a ring and see whether you can bring the dual combo out to the UK? Because we've got 4.5 million people on waiting lists who need some screening.
Yeah, that's right. And we talk frequently about when they're going to break out of the US.
Just moving quickly, just on the trading update you gave at the same time as the funding, just briefly, just give us a bit of colour on the progress of the early CDT testing in the NHS, because you seem to have signed some good sort of like healthcare trust contracts.
That's right. I mean, despite the backdrop of COVID, there has been tremendous interest in early CDT lung, almost exceeding our expectation, given the stretch that the healthcare system has been under over the last 12 months. But following a very positive MedTech innovation briefing March last year from NICE, we entered into a period of diligence with NHS England, the centre, and NICE, which had us accepted onto the diagnostic assessment program. So it's a very expensive program that they run, the diligence, and run both utility and health economic models over assets to then make provide guidance to the healthcare systems to whether they should be adopting these tests. That's a 13-month program that we should be out of probably early autumn, I suspect, with some draft guidance, to offer a bit more top-down adoption pressure into the system. But in the meantime, we've been selling bottom up, and we were delighted to enter into an agreement with Southampton to support for the next 3 years their lung health check program. We did a similar sort of deal up in Leeds over a 3-year period to support their lung health check program, and the two sites are going to be collaborating around a research program to encourage other diagnostic companies with adjunctive products to that program to also have their products evaluated, and then we also were adopted by a GP-led consortia that don't have a lung health check program. There's only 12 of these in the UK at the moment, and so coverage is patchy. But what we're finding is outside of the lung health check program, GP consortia are sort of getting together and saying, well, we've got a problem with lung cancer, late lung cancer diagnoses. We have some budget to focus on these. Can we not put together our own program using early CDT lung as the triage into low dose CT, and Norfolk and Waveney were brave enough to stick their head above the parapet and go first, and we are just seeing them go from success to success in the early stages of that rollout, and we expect there to be more in the not too distant future, as there now is starting to become a bit of a ripple effect in this bottom up drive to have the NHS adopt early CDT lung.
Yeah. And then just sort of finally, in terms of the sort of like the pipeline, etc., conversion, the news flow over the next few months. I mean, in the trading update, you mentioned you've got 130 potential opportunities there. How should investors think about that sort of news flow?
Well, we've I think announced as of today 9 contracts since the same time last year on the ImmunoInsight side of our business. There certainly are more contracts that are either in the final stages of commercial negotiation or indeed negotiating the legal T's and C's at the moment. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw some of those drop into this financial year, or a 31 May year end. Yeah. On the service side of the business, and on the product side of the business, I think there's ample opportunity over the next couple of months to land a couple more NHS engagements for early CDT lung. So I think more of the same, but building momentum, maybe building some frequency, which should give investors a sense that market expectation is well within our reach.
Yeah, great. Well, just at the end of it, I'd like to sort of like emphasize just on valuation wise. I think at the current share price, Oncimmunes valued at about 140 million pounds. But there was a transaction, I think Roche bought Genmark Diagnostics just 3 weeks ago for 1.8 billion. And I know historically we've had Exact Science buying Thrive for 2 billion, and Grail was bought by Illumina for 8 billion. So we're talking enormous numbers here.
Yeah, and of course, Oxford Nanopore over the weekend announced their intent to IPO in London. Minimal revenues, £6 million a month burn, and valuations that could be as much as 4 billion. So this space is really hot, as you know, Paul.
Yeah, highest value. Okay, well, thanks very much, Adam, and really appreciate your insights. And if any of the investors want to follow Oncimmune, then please just press the button on the Vox Markets website, because you can get all the information, all the latest news, and all the commentary on there directly. So thanks very much, Adam.
Good to speak to you. Take care.
Thanks.